"Pack your things and get out. Leave the key under the mat. I'll be back in the morning," said her husband. But this ending wasn't at all what he expected. Friends, stay with us through the end of this story. The woman at the center of it is not who she seems. Her silence hides not weakness, but a plan. And the ending will surprise you. But before we begin, let's do a quick roll call. Tell us where you're from. We'd love to read your comments. Enjoy the story. Up until she was 42, Rachel dragged herself through life step by step like a wounded soldier carrying herself across a battlefield. Her path was never lined with rose petals, more like the shattered pieces of hope. After high school, it seemed like life was just getting started. But fate quickly set the record straight. While her classmates were going on dates and filling their college albums with smiling faces, Rachel was lugging pharmacy bags and memorizing medical terms that even half the nurses didn't know. Her mother had fallen ill, an uncompromising diagnosis, no chance of recovery. Every day for Rachel began not with coffee, but with adult diapers, pills, and bland cereal. She didn't drop out of college, nor did she abandon her mother. Her studies were stolen moments between overnight bedside shifts and endless dishwashing. They lived off her mother's disability check, a meager sum that seemed to vanish before it arrived. Side jobs? Forget it. Leaving her mom alone was out of the question. She couldn't even use the bathroom on her own, let alone cook. Caring for a sick parent while slowly losing your own strength is not an act of heroism. It's just daily life with no other option, and Rachel accepted it as her burden. When her mom's condition worsened, Rachel had to leave school and find work. She got a job at a bank branch downtown at the front desk where there were customers' papers and a constant pressure to smile, as if she wasn't dying inside. She played a role, the friendly girl behind the glass. But in her mind, it was all about one more form, one more signature, and sometimes the dark thought, just one more step, and I'll break. But she couldn't afford to break. No one else would care for her mother. Then her mom passed away, and it was like someone had switched off the lights in her world. Silence came, not peaceful, but eerie, like an echo of what had been. Freedom arrived not as joy, but like a hangover. Rachel, for the first time, felt nothing, as if she were the shadow of herself. A man entered her life unexpectedly, Michael, an ordinary, slightly tired engineer in town for work. No big speeches, just one day, he handed her a cup of coffee in the bank cafeteria and said, "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders." And Rachel smiled, not the fake smile for clients, a real one. Things started slowly, then more confidently. They took walks, talked late into the night, discussed books no one else seemed to read. He was her first real adult relationship, not a boy, not a savior, not some fairy tale prince, just a man who made her feel like she didn't have to be strong all the time. But it didn't go by the book either. The question of who would move where became complicated. Michael lived in another city. He had a good job, a stable future. Rachel was renting a one-bedroom apartment with roots buried deep in concrete. It seemed like she was ready to leave, just to be with him. But just when she made up her mind, Michael got laid off. Life had played its wild card. He moved in with her and decided to start over in her town. Things snowballed. Shopping, rent, plans about where to put the dresser, then the wedding. Her friends looked at her with admiration. Lucky girl, they said. A handsome guy and a 3-bedroom apartment instead of a 1-bedroom. No one knew how Rachel sat in the bathroom at night wondering if she'd made another mistake. She wanted stability, a home. What she got instead was a man with man-of-the-house vibes, a 3-bedroom paid for by Michael's parents, and a lingering feeling that she wasn't truly the one in charge. Her own apartment was rented out. They figured it should make some money, and so they started their real life together. The romance faded fast. Reality set in, the kind of everyday routine people love to romanticize before they get married. Rachel, exhausted but grateful, tried to keep the spark alive, until she realized it wasn't a candle flickering, it was a light bulb that had never turned on in the first place. At first, everything seemed to go smoothly. as if the universe had decided to play fairy godmother for once. Rachel finally allowed herself to breathe. She even began to believe in happily ever after. She and Michael settled into their new place, picked out paint samples, argued over curtains, hauled furniture from the nearest home improvement store, where checkout lines were always longest on weekends. They argued, made up, laughed, made plans. Everything felt simple, promising. They dreamed of having a child, of traveling, of doing that remodel, eventually. When Rachel saw the 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test, it wasn't fear that rushed in. It was joy, pure, warm, almost childlike. She gently touched her still flat stomach and thought, now this house will have real meaning. Michael was happy too, or at least he played the part well. He hugged her more, ordered tiny socks online, tossed around baby names. It all played out like a well-rated TV drama until the real scene started. Pregnancy wasn't easy. Morning sickness, blood pressure swings, a strange anxiety she couldn't quite name. She found herself craving solitude, just to sit quietly in the kitchen. No small talk, no hands on her shoulders, no questions. Michael chalked it all up to hormones and tried to be understanding. But deep down, irritation began to creep in. His face more and more often held that look of silent frustration he never put into words. When their daughter was born, joy came too, loud, crying, endlessly needy joy. This tiny being turned their home upside down. And with that joy came sleepless nights, pacifiers lost under the couch, silent breakfasts, and a new chill in their voices. Rachel was neck-deep in routine. Diapers, laundry, desperate attempts to nap for 20 minutes at a time. She didn't look in mirrors anymore. She already knew. She wasn't there. Only exhaustion. Only function. Michael landed a new job with a solid salary but was almost never home. He said he worked late to provide for them. But in Rachel's head, the same thought kept echoing. Who are you providing for if we're not even here anymore? Her one bedroom, the old apartment she used to own, no longer brought any financial relief. Tenants rotated like clockwork. One skipped on utilities, another brought roaches and broke a window on the way out. Once she had to call in a repair guy. Some new tenant's dog chewed up the couch and they left without a word. Rachel was overwhelmed, juggling all of it while carrying her baby around. Eventually she gave up, sold the place. They used part of the money for home renovations. That moment became a turning point. It seemed minor, out with the old, in with the new. But for Rachel, it was saying goodbye to the last piece of her independence. Now everything was theirs. But it still felt like his. When their daughter started preschool and Rachel went back to work, it felt like she was coming back to life. She got a job as a quality inspector at a local manufacturing plant. Not the most prestigious gig, but her nerves stayed intact, and her co-workers weren't playing corporate games. The pay was lower, sure, but at least in the evenings, she could sit at the kitchen table sipping tea, not with anxiety, but with a gentle kind of sadness. Michael withdrew more and more. He worked weekends, said it was temporary, but temporary turned into years. It was like they lived in parallel rooms. Sometimes they passed in the hallway, shared updates about their daughter or the weather, brushed shoulders, then walked away in different directions. If there was ever love, it had dissolved into schedules, resentments, and silence. Rachel never complained. She just started talking less. Her words went to group chats with girlfriends. Those same friends who had once admired her marriage now looked at her with quiet sympathy. One night after a third glass of white wine, one of them mumbled, "You know, your husband's a decent guy, but he doesn't love you." That night, Rachel stood on the balcony a long time. She breathed in the cold night air, listened to the city, and said nothing. No tears, no breakdown, just a deep realization. The truth had been edited out of their relationship a long time ago. As their daughter grew older, a computer appeared in the house. Then came school, after-school clubs, weekly laundry days on Sundays, and evening homework checks. Life had settled into a quiet rhythm. So quiet, you could hear the old hardwood floor creaking with the changes in temperature. Rachel still woke up earlier than anyone else to make breakfast. stayed up later to clean up after everyone, and often timed things just right so she wouldn't even cross paths with Michael. He left the house like a ghost and came back almost the same way, and if he stayed out a little longer than usual, no one asked why. No one was suspicious. They were too tired to care, too used to indifference to notice anymore. They didn't argue, they just didn't talk. When Rachel found out she was pregnant again, her first reaction wasn't happiness. It wasn't even fear. It was confusion. She stared at those two solid lines and thought, seriously, now? Just when she had finally managed to catch her breath, it felt like someone had hit the reset button. Back to diapers, sleepless nights, sore backs, and that creeping feeling that the world was moving forward without her. Michael's reaction was worse than she expected. He didn't seem shocked. He just sat on the edge of the bed, stared at the floor, and sighed. "Rach, why?" he said flatly. "We agreed. One and done." "Agreed?" she asked, feeling something hot and sharp rising in her chest. "When? Where? Show me where I signed that." He was silent for a while. Then, without looking up, muttered, "Maybe we should think about this." It's not too late. It wasn't a suggestion. It was nearly an order. And in that moment, Rachel understood. This man, the one she had built a life and a home with, no longer felt anything toward her but irritation. He wasn't ready for a new life. Truthfully, he didn't want to be part of her life at all anymore. She never even considered ending the pregnancy. No screaming, no tears. She just turned inward and let go of any expectation. She focused on herself instead, started reading again, picked up yoga, which she had given up years earlier because she had no time. This pregnancy went smoother than the first, not because her body handled it better, but because this time she expected no help. She knew she was alone, and somehow that knowledge was liberating. Michael showed little interest in her health or in the child to come. He still transferred money, still bought groceries, still acted like a good man. But between them, there was now a real wall, not made of bricks, but of silence. Sometimes he'd ask politely how she was, only to immediately bury himself in his phone again. Their daughter started asking questions about the baby, and Rachel answered them as gently as she could, without bitterness. She no longer hoped the family would change, but she made a decision. This child would have what she never did. When their son was born, something clicked in Rachel. His scent, his tiny fingers, his cry in the dark hours of night, all of it became the reason to endure everything else. She barely slept, but she didn't complain. She carried him like a symbol of a new life she would never give up again. As for Michael, he became a roommate. He occasionally patted the boy's head, always awkwardly. Never changed a diaper, never got up in the night, never did daycare drop-off. He was there, but not really. Even their daughter noticed. Her voice started to take on a sarcastic edge when she said things like, "Dad, you're like a guest around here. You come and go." Rachel didn't respond. Inside, though, something was growing. Not anger, not grief, but a deep, unshakable understanding. There was no going back. Sometimes she wondered if it was all just a dream she'd eventually wake up from, or a movie where she was cast in the wrong part. But the reality was too sharp, too detailed for fiction. Every evening, after both kids were asleep, she'd sit by the window with a cup of tea and remember the girl she used to be, the one who dreamed about love, about a real home and family. She realized, I didn't make a mistake dreaming. I just chose the wrong person to dream with. She began setting money aside, quietly, bit by bit. She opened a separate savings account, bought a small fireproof safe and tucked it behind old boxes of baby clothes in the hallway closet. Not because she was planning to run, but for security. She started noticing the little things Michael did, where he left important documents, how he spoke on the phone, what websites he visited, not out of jealousy, but for awareness. Because in Rachel's mind, an idea had begun to form. Clear, fragile, but absolutely determined. She didn't know when it would happen exactly, but she was certain. Her moment was coming. Rachel learned how to live in parallel realities. One hand stirring soup on the stove, the other bouncing her toddler on her hip while her mind ran calculations, plans, possibilities. It wasn't revenge she wanted, or justice. She was simply tired. Tired of the silence, the half-truths, the dimmed light that filled every room of their home. She wanted to walk out of that space where everything had faded. Michael kept going through the motions. He worked late, came home even later, dropped money in the bank account, forgot birthdays and school meetings. He wasn't abusive, he wasn't a drunk, he wasn't cruel. He just wasn't there, not in the way that mattered. He started guarding his phone, putting it on silent, changing the password. One day he forgot it on the couch, and Rachel saw a message flash across the screen. "You coming tonight?" She didn't read any further, not because she didn't want to know, but because she already knew too much. She had buried her husband emotionally the day he responded to her pregnancy with, "Maybe we should think about it." Everything after that was just preparation, and she had been preparing like a spy heading into an operation, quietly, without drama or breakdowns. She had locked her emotions in a box and buried the key. Each of her days became like a chess game, and she was the quiet grandmaster, moving pieces patiently, waiting. Her oldest daughter had moved out to attend college in another city. Their relationship had been rocky during her teenage years, but now Rachel gave her space. She didn't lecture or micromanage, just asked, "Did you eat today? And how's your semester going?" The answers were brief but warm. "Yeah, Mom." The daughter was growing up. She saw things, and she didn't judge. She understood. Meanwhile, Michael was disappearing even more. Friday nights were for corporate events. Sometimes he came home drunk but never made a scene. He'd simply collapse into bed, turn his back to her, and fall asleep. Rachel didn't touch him, didn't speak. She just watched. Then came the days she would remember in perfect detail. It was spring, late evening. Outside the snow was melting, and inside the house the smell of tobacco and unfamiliar perfume lingered. Michael walked in, gave their son a quick hug out of habit, and then said something that stunned her. "We should do something for our 10-year anniversary. Maybe take a trip?" Rachel looked at him like he was a stranger. His face was slightly flushed, eyes darting like he was searching for the right moment to say something important, but couldn't quite get it out. "Let's go to dinner," he suggested. "Just the two of us. Talk a little." It was unexpected, the first gesture like this in years. Rachel agreed, although something uneasy stirred inside her. It wasn't the proposal itself. It was the tone, the way he avoided eye contact, the way he sat too far from her at the restaurant table, like he didn't want to risk touching her by accident. They ate mostly in silence, talked about the decor, the salad, the music, like strangers playing old roles long since forgotten. Then Michael leaned back in his chair, sighed, and said, "I'm filing for divorce." He said it without anger, like an accountant reporting quarterly numbers. His eyes scanned her face like he was waiting for the storm, yelling, crying, some kind of meltdown. But Rachel only nodded slowly. She had known this would come, just earlier than expected. "We're like strangers," he added, like it was a defense. "I'm exhausted. You're exhausted. The kids don't feel warmth anymore. Why keep going?" She looked at him and said nothing, not because she had nothing to say, but because there was no need. Everything was already clear. This man had left her a long time ago. The fact that he was finally admitting it wasn't painful, it was liberating. "All right," she said at last, "a divorce it is." Michael was caught off guard. His face changed like a kid expecting punishment and instead getting praised for telling the truth. He scrambled to take control again. "I'll come back Sunday," he said, like he had an internal checklist. "You'll have time to move out calmly, no scenes, you understand, right? The apartment's mine. I bought it before we were married. That's all pretty straightforward." He didn't even look at her as he spoke, delivered it with that falsely sympathetic tone that made her stomach turn. "I know you make enough now to rent a place on the outskirts somewhere. I mean, it'll be rough with the boys, sure, but you'll manage. You're tough. If you behave reasonably, I might even send a little something your way now and then. Groceries or whatever. Your daughter's in college, got her stipend. She's not starving, so you'll be okay. Rachel just nodded. No emotion on her face. No outrage, no tears, no fury, just a nod. Michael thought she was in shock, but the truth was, she had been ready for this moment for a long time. When he left that night, Rachel didn't rush to pack. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She went to her son's room, kissed him on the forehead, adjusted his blanket. Then she sat in the kitchen, poured herself a cup of tea, and pulled a folder from the back of the cupboard. Inside were documents, printouts, certificates, papers she had quietly collected for the last 2 years. Everything was in order. The general power of attorney had been signed back when Michael couldn't make it to pick up documents for their daughter. He had signed without even reading it. He was too busy with a new fling at work, a blonde from accounting who made him forget his responsibilities at home. Rachel had realized then, time was on her side. When he told her in the cafe that he wanted out, she didn't resist. She simply took advantage of the door he opened. He wanted to leave. That made things easier. He gave the order to vacate the premises, so she would vacate, just not in the way he expected. Her face was calm the next morning as she left the apartment with her son. No drama, no goodbye. She disappeared. Completely. Michael came back on Sunday almost on schedule, with a sense of relief, like he had finally shed some heavy weight. He carried a new shirt under his arm, a bottle of red wine in hand. Maybe he thought he'd relax, celebrate the new phase of his life. He imagined walking into a quiet apartment, empty except for some neatly folded belongings, a breath of fresh air, no crying, no scenes, just peace, just freedom. But there was no key under the mat. That threw him for a second, but he didn't worry. He reached for his own key, the old one, familiar, comforting, slid it into the lock. Nothing. The lock wouldn't budge, not even a click. He tried again, harder, then slammed his fist against the door. After a minute, the door swung open. A tall, broad-shouldered man stood in the doorway, buzz cut, calm eyes, the kind of look you get from someone who usually says, "You sure you're in the right place?" "Who the hell are you?" Michael stammered, taking a step back. "This is my place," the man replied flatly. "I live here now, and I know for sure you're not my neighbor." Michael froze. Confusion turned to panic. He started waving his arms, bringing up ownership, documents, rights. The man didn't flinch. "Call the cops if you don't believe me," he said coolly. "I've got everything legal." Michael left, but not for long. He returned a few hours later with the blonde woman, the one who had helped spark this entire mess. She pulled her scarf tighter around her neck, clearly uncomfortable. They stood together at the locked door as Michael tried again and again to open it. Nothing. Maybe you misunderstood something," she said hesitantly. But her tone wasn't supportive. It was nervous. It was the sound of someone realizing they might be on the losing side. "She couldn't have," he muttered. "This was my place. I bought it before we got married. I've got proof. I'll show you everything." But the woman was already backing away. Her expression said it all. "This is your mess, and I don't want to be part of it." He had to crash at an old friend's place that night. Barely slept. Tossed and turned, haunted by everything that had just collapsed. The next morning, he showed up at the HR office of the factory where Rachel had worked. They greeted him politely, but coldly. She had quit nearly a year ago. No explanation, no trail. He tried the school. Maybe he could find his son there. But the staff told him the boy had transferred nearly 2 years ago. Where? They wouldn't say. Privacy policy. They spoke to him like he was a stranger, because in truth he was. His last hope was their daughter. He called. Her voice was distant, clipped. "Dad, I don't know anything. I've got finals. Don't call me right now." Click. He stood at a bus stop, staring at the asphalt beneath his feet, feeling the ground slip away. Everything he thought he owned was gone. No address, no number, no home. And for the first time he understood. Rachel hadn't just left. She had disappeared. He started remembering. The way he had signed that power of attorney without reading it. The way he had brushed off her quiet questions when she asked if she could file something on his behalf just to save him a trip. The way he had stopped listening long ago. how he had handed over pieces of his life, papers, access, signatures, without realizing he was giving away the keys to everything. He met with an attorney. They told him that if ownership had been legally transferred under a valid power of attorney, the transaction stood. The apartment was no longer his. If he wanted to challenge it, he could try filing a lawsuit. But deep down, Michael already knew. It was too late. This hadn't been a reaction. It was a plan, a cold, patient, brilliant plan. He couldn't even tell when exactly it all began to crumble. When Rachel stopped being the woman waiting for affection and became the woman capable of disappearing without a trace. She hadn't shouted. She hadn't begged. She had just acted. Not with revenge, but with precision. 3 days later, Michael returned to what used to be his building. He didn't try to get in. He just stood across the street staring up at the windows he once looked out of, remembering how, long ago in the very beginning, Rachel had once told him, "Never hurt a woman who gave you everything. She won't scream, she won't fight, she'll disappear, and you won't realize what you've lost until it's far too late." He had laughed back then. Now he stood there in silence, in the cold. The loneliness wasn't quiet. It was deafening. He wandered to a nearby park and sat on a bench. Tried calling his daughter again. She didn't answer. Tried messaging that woman he left Rachel for. The messages didn't go through. Blocked. Even she had walked away without a word, without a glance back. And all that was left was winter. Not the one outside, but the one inside his chest, barren, gray, unrelenting. He didn't just lose a wife. He lost the woman who had quietly been his anchor, his shelter, his home. But he'd mistaken her for background noise. The moral? It's simple. Never underestimate a silent woman. If she's still talking, there's hope. But if she's silent, she's already made her move, a move you'll never see coming. Friends, if you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. Until next time.